there you are. It's another Confessions podcast. That's what this is. Thank you for downloading another audio array of terrible tales from the unbelievably sinful but ever-growing Radio 2 audience. This week's colourful collection includes a bold bout of bank breaking, a hideous hearing hoax, a classic common confusion, and a kiddies candle crisis. It's all coming up in the next few moments, but who will you forgive? So here we go with tonight's confession, and who's this from? It's from Dave. Thank you, Dave, for sending in tonight's tale. Send yours, please, once you've worked it out, confessions@bbc.co.uk. Dear Simon and fellow judgment passers, it's been on my mind for a while, and as the crisis in our banks comes and goes, it raises its head from time to time, and I have to admit, I might have contributed to the ugliness of everything that Rebecca has been reporting over recent years.
Gosh.
Goodness
and
me.
you didn't know about it?
Is it going to be a mover and a shaker in the banking business?
No.
Is he?
Now, I must firstly make it clear that I worked in good old high street banking in the days when bank managers were really bank managers, when a computer helped the manager in his day's work, rather than now when the manager helps the computer to run the day's business. And so, I have never been one of those slavering, Hogarthian, greed-infused manipulators of markets.
Wow.
I like the way
Should
this
we
is
stop
going.
there? Should we stop
Is he
there?
still working for a bank?
Anyway, I digress. A small group of us young, testosterone-filled bank clerks, there's a thought, used to mess about at the end of our day, once the manager and other staff had gone. Whilst they thought we were doing paid overtime, clearing away difficult or time-consuming tasks, no, we created games like mini-golf around the back corridors of the branches, using bins as the hole, or frisbee around the banking hall, where we had to throw a mini frisbee so it went under the dip below each of the cashier's glass screens. Childish, I know, but we were just out of teenagerdom and doing a very sedate, boring, paper-based task, and we had to let off steam. But by far our favourite game was strong room football.
It's one of Matt's Friday fixtures.
Let me guess, man, is there a football that you play in a bank where all the money and gold is kept?
Strong room football.
I bought a small purple and blue kiddies football from Woolies back in the 80s, and it travelled to most branches I worked at. The Wembley of all strong room pitches was underground a branch in the southwest of England.
Well covered, well covered. Well covered, that man.
Just crossing that.
Yes.
A giant space this was, with shelving all around and two vast hardened iron doors that looked like they'd been forged in the Iron Age. It was rock solid. One match saw me do a brilliant curler from the obsolete paper's end, a certain goal into the top corner beside the paid cheque boxes. Mighty Martin flung himself upwards and headed both ball and strong room door together. Solid iron. Stars. Match over. I digress again. As the costly events that sparked our banking crisis occurred, it all started at a branch
Cross
Not
that out.
there.
nearby.
Well done.
Where Pete, the real funny man of our group of boys behaving badly, and I regularly wrapped up our days with soccer. The pitch here was the machine room, at the back of which was the strong room. We opened the safe door, moved all tables and chairs from the work area, and took it in turns to be goalie and striker. One fateful evening, Pete went for the match-winning volley. He miscued. The ball curved upwards at speed. It took out a vast and expensive fluorescent-like chandelier-type thing with tubes and covers. It all crashed to the floor and broke into what seemed like 1,000 pieces. Game definitely over. So it was that I had to make sure that I came in the earliest in the next morning to open and conduct the early morning search and then let the staff in. And would you believe it, horror of horrors, a light cover must have fallen out overnight and smashed.
They do. Yeah.
I don't know how it happened, but I advised the manager, Mr. Addison... Did we change that?
Oh, no.
Sorry, Mr. Addison.
As soon as he came in, lovely man that he was, he simply sighed at the painful extra cost, shrugged and asked me to get it sorted. Well, a few days later, we were back on the pitch again. For some reason, on this evening, the strong room door would not stay fully open, so I wisely suggested using one of the two large safe keys to wedge it open. Notice how he's already added wisely in, just in case you might think that actually for a safe... That's a
Maybe
very...
keep it shut.
Might be foolish.
Maybe.
Anyway, it was a brilliant job, great match, time to go. But the safe door had stuck. Oh, no. It had stuck solid, open, atop my improvised wedge, and nothing would budge it. Oh. Starting with wooden rulers and other sundry long, thin items, we poked and prodded and pulled and pushed to no avail. A career-shortening moment, you might think. because there we were, safe, wide open, many tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of pounds within, and no way to lock it. And worse still, at 8 o'clock, the auto alarm would ring at the police station, ensure a visit from the constabulary with blue flashing lights, a call to head office security, who would then call our manager, who was at home, and he'd be cross. I wanted to sound like I was in control of a tough situation, so I called the manager at home. I told him that I had dropped a key on the floor, just as Pete was manfully swinging the door shut, after, of course, many hours of overtime, bringing his branch admin up to date. And quite bizarrely, the key, you'll never believe this, Mr. Manager, sir, Mr. Addison, is it still Mr. Addison?
Yeah,
found
probably.
a tiny space underneath, and the whole thing is jammed. Taking control, I said that I would contact the police, I would avoid the alarm call-out, and then the report to head office, causing all kinds of headache. You don't want to be bothered with that. I said I would arrange for regular overnight checks of the bank, and that I would get in at 6 o'clock the following morning. More overtime for me. Solution accepted, bless him, and he accepted that I was going to be in charge. And so it appears that it was I who, by hiding my actions, by abusing my position, by undertaking transactions and deals outside my remit, by blaming other outside factors, maybe by hiring locksmiths, buying new bulbs and so on, did I start the great fall of the banks? I seek forgiveness from all the public in the UK who are still suffering, and Mr. Addison. I will not ask for forgiveness from Rebecca, as I know there's
Waste of time.
There's absolutely no chance there. My argument for seeking forgiveness is that whilst my actions were, well, pathetic, I did personally resolve them to everyone's satisfaction and face up to my misdeeds. This was a very, very long time ago. Is that right? Yeah. Also, I did not drive a Porsche, never have. I do not drink champers for breakfast. I'm not called Rupert or Charles, or have a double-barreled name that sounds like it's from Jeeves and Worcester, if that helps, Matt.
Yep.
Anyway, it's Dave's tale of banking well, actually, it's just football in front of a safe.
Yeah, I
That's a
wonder whether
crazy
he could have
thing.
found a better place than the safe. Do you think?
Well,
He
it's
could
better
have-
than jumpers for goalposts, isn't it? Let's have the
suppose
safe
so, but
as
they
a
could have
goal.
maybe just gone out the front or something. I mean, just chosen somewhere a little bit less, sensitive. However, I think he did absolutely the right thing by calling the manager. He could have just pretended it never happened. It was nothing to do with him. So he didn't shirk his responsibilities. And I think, Dave, you don't need to hold yourself responsible for the financial crisis by the sounds of things. It was only a light bulb and a locksmith, right? So no, you're completely forgiven.
Well, that was all the stuff he took out. Anyway, I wonder if Mr. Addison is sort of like a Captain Mannering type.
Yes,
it's this
that's what I
kind of
kept
era,
imagining. I kept
think.
imagining
What do you
that
think?
all the time, really. You didn't start the banking crisis. Fair enough. Too big a crisis to be started by just you, Dave, I think. But I'm not sure. I don't mind lies normally, the odd white lie. We have a lot of that round. Anyway, the thing is, you did lie, and you did break the light fitting the first time and the bank door the second time, and it does cost money. And in the end, as a customer, I get the bill for that. So on balance, I'm not going to forgive you. I'm not going to forgive you.
Well, I think there might be a few. If I ask for banking confessions, do you think how about strong room and safe confessions?
Yeah.
Do you think there'd be a few there?
One or two. Yeah,
Do you think we'd get away with any?
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting one.
What do you think,
on
Matthew?
balance.
It's hardly Ocean's 11, this, is it? Using rulers to get past the safe and then having to open the door anyway. I think we have to question Mr. Addison here. His role, very laissez-faire attitude to his bank. People playing frisbee in the front of his bank
He's
and
busy.
through the windows, and then playing footy in the safe. What are you doing? He's
in the home guard.
Just at home.
He's in
He's
the
at
home
home the
Don't
whole
give me your name
time.
back. Don't give me your name
That's
back.
where the blame lies. It lies with how this works with the metaphor as well, doesn't it? It lies with the people at the top. Those are the ones that should be very much.
Very much what?
Yeah.
Is it the boss class you're
Yes,
after, the bosses?
that's what we're saying. Absolutely.
What? That's you against the world.
Editorialising once again. So, yes, I am going to forgive him, but not Mr. Addison and his acolytes.
We did tinnitus about 20 minutes ago, and this is a hearing-related confession.
Wow.
How about
Almost
that?
as if this show's produced.
It comes from Jack. Jack sends in tonight's tale. Simon, my confession happened back at primary school in 1979 when I was 9 years old. It started very innocently during a very dull maths lesson when the local health visitor entered the class. We were told about her visit during the even more dull school assembly earlier in the morning. We were informed that a select few would be called out of class for a hearing test. As I thought my hearing was okay, I didn't really take much notice, really. So you can imagine my surprise when the last name she called was mine. Although surprised, I was delighted to be getting the unexpected opportunity to be leaving the maths lesson, which was about to take an all-time new low level of dullness. We were called in one by one into the cleaner's cupboard. My time had come with 10 minutes of my maths lesson still left. I came up with a quick plan as to how I could stretch out my test to coincide with the end of class. This was the start of a cycle of events that would spin out of control. Sitting there with the huge headphones on my tiny head, I was given a box that had a big black button on. I was told by the nice, friendly health visitor that I was to hear a series of bleeps. Some would be louder than others. My task was to press the big black button each time I heard a bleep. Easy, I thought. But then, remembering I still had to stretch this mission out, I started to implement my cunning plan. After the first few bleeps, I pressed the button, no problem. Then the bleeps got lower and lower in their audibility. And this is where I would then sit, with a poker face, and not press the button. This went on for what seemed like ages. I could see that the health visitor was becoming more and more concerned, but I kept my face straight and my legs swung from the chair. After what seemed like ages, I was told that the test had ended and I could leave. I ran out of the broom cupboard just in time for the bell ringing for afternoon playtime. I'd done it, mission accomplished, and I ran out smiling to myself and forgot the whole darn business. Until the next day, when I was called again by the same health visitor for the same test. Well, there was nothing I could do but continue with the same plan I created the day before. After what seemed like ages, the test finally came to an end. Only this time I was taken back into class, and I could clearly hear my teacher being informed, "Yes, it's confirmed." To which my teacher replied, "Poor blighter." That would explain a lot. Anyway, they were both then smiling at me in a patronising way, which I now call the sympathy smile. Thinking no more of these tests, the comments and the sympathy smiles, some months passed when one normal day of school I came home to find my mum and dad sitting at the kitchen table with a chair pulled out for me. "Come and sit down, son," said my dad in a calm but concerning voice. "Oh, come and sit down, son." The walk to the chair felt like a lifetime, with each step a different action of badness that I'd done that week. Holding a big brown envelope which had the local hospital's name printed on it, my heart sank. My mum said, "Do you remember some time ago you had a few hearing tests at school?" I slowly nodded like a guilty criminal. "Well," she said, trying to remain calm before my dad snapped with impatience, "You're going to need to have an operation to have some grommet things fitted to your eardrums." Although shocked at first, I quickly became relieved, as I remembered I had in fact lied during both tests, meaning that I did not require any such operation. I should just tell them. But before I could come clean, my mum explained that the operation date had been set by the hospital for late July, to which my dad then jumped in crossly. "It means I've had to cancel the annual holiday to Wales, and the robbing blighter would not refund the deposit." Unable to take in the shock and now the new guilt that the family holiday had been cancelled, I needed time to think of how I would confess my actions without making them mad, so I simply nodded and left the table and went to my room. I thought it would be best to wait until the next day to confess my devious actions, as I was sure that everyone would have calmed down by then. This was not the case, as the next day my dad was still fuming and ranting. "I work all year and get just 1 week off." My mum tried to calm the situation by saying, "Well, he can't help it if he's got a hearing problem. You said yourself he's got a vacant look on his face most of the time. At least now we know why." Well, that's charming, I thought. Before I knew it, the weeks turned into days before the planned operation, and I'd still been unable to find the courage to explain my actions to my upset mum, angry dad, and even now my brothers, who were both gutted with my problems and the fact that the family holiday was going to be scrapped because of them. The night before the operation, my mum was packing a red heart-shaped vanity case she'd borrowed from one of the neighbours' daughters. I was horrified. I said, "I'm not taking that," to which my dad, who was still cross, jumped in saying, "Look, sunshine, I'm losing a day's pay tomorrow, so you can take that to hospital. Stop your complaining and get to bed." Gulp. This had gone way too far. I found myself at a point of no return. Well, no worries. I could still tell them in the morning, and then we'll laugh about it and give each other huge hugs and so on. Sitting in the back of the car on the way to the hospital with the girly vanity case on my lap, all I could do was stare vacantly out of the window with my stomach rumbling with lack of food, as was instructed by the letter. And all I could do was think that none of this would have happened if only I'd liked maths. Before I knew it, I was wearing a hospital gown.
What?
I finally found the courage. I shouted out, "Mum and Dad, I got something to tell you." No. But before I could finish my confession, a team of doctors and nurses came into the room. My parents were asked to say goodbye. Mum kissed me, and my dad ruffled my hair and said, "Be brave, son." His voice has changed slightly.
It has a little.
At least he's not cross anymore.
No.
In what seemed like seconds, I felt a scratch on the back of my hand and a falling experience of darkness. And before I knew it, I was being woken by someone shouting my name, trying to wake me up from the anaesthetic. I could hear my heartbeat, the sound of wheels turning on the trolley as I was being wheeled back to the ward. I could even hear the porter's watch ticking as he lifted me off the trolley back onto the bed. In fact, I could hear the slight sound thanks to having 2 grommets fitted into 2 perfectly normal hearing drums. Eardrums is, I imagine, the phrase.
Yes.
It took a while to get used to my new superpower hearing. But anyway, I suppose I need forgiveness from your team and, of course, the listeners. And what seemed like an innocent attempt to get out of a maths lesson turned into a series of unfortunate events. Above all, I seek forgiveness from my parents, who to this day do not know the truth behind the only year the family did not go on the annual trip to Wales. I did confess some years ago to my brothers, who enjoy bribing me in return for another round at the pub, or they would tell Mum and Dad the truth. Well, says Jack, I've just done it. And that is why we didn't go to Wales, because I was just getting out of a hearing test and it ended up with having an operation. Well, we had a similar one with the appendix, but anyway, this sounds even more serious. What do you think?
It's extraordinary.
Yes.
And the most extraordinary thing is that he was just getting out of 10 minutes of his maths class.
Yes.
I mean, he probably would have had to go back for 5 minutes if he hadn't pretended that he couldn't hear. And I'm also surprised that in the hospital they didn't decide to do their own tests. They just based it all on these 2 tests that were done in the cleaner's cupboard at school.
All these things were a long time.
Yes, clearly.
Decades ago,
I think
in another era.
He should have asked for more tests, and failing that, he should have fessed up far earlier. Ridiculous, he was about to say, but he couldn't because they were just putting in the anaesthetic. So for all those reasons, no, you're not forgiven, Jack.
The past is another country.
Oh, it is.
Yes.
Well done.
Anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, things moved very quickly here, didn't they? From going from the school just having 2 tests, and then suddenly, right, you're in for an operation, we're cancelling the holiday to Wales, and everything's going to happen whether you like it or not. I'm beginning to see why he had that vacant look on his face the entire time. He clearly never said boo to a goose, this poor lad.
Jack, yes.
He was just, put me in for an operation I don't need. Yeah, that's fine. Probably won't say anything until I'm under the anaesthetic.
Actually, I was just making it up.
Yeah, sorry. I've got to say, I did one of those tests for hearing, and I was super competitive. I really wanted to get all of this.
I can't believe that.
I was sort of hitting the button even when there wasn't anything there. I loved it. So I am going to forgive, because that's an unbelievable story that I thought... Basically, the story was going to be you got to the hospital and then decided, do you know what, it's all been a joke. No, I'm going to wait for the operation because I haven't got the nerves.
He's got superpower hearing now.
And we've cancelled the holiday to Wales. Brilliant.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely forgive.
Confession time. Now, on Monday, we had a confession from a banker who, you remember, they were playing football in the strong room.
The vault, yeah.
In the vault. And the vault was the goal, anyway, and the strong room door got jammed. And we were wondering if there were any bankers out there who had things to confess. And it turned out that there are. Here's Clive. In fact, it says Clive Harper here, so maybe that's his...
Have you not changed the name?
Have we not changed
I'm
anything?
sure we've changed the name.
It says here Clive Harper. I'm just telling you it says Clive Harper. It's gone through a number of committees. Dear Simon and the Collective, in the early 90s, I was a newly qualified chartered accountant trying to make my way in the world. Living north of Watford Gap, there was precious little opportunity for anyone wanting to pursue a career in the then highly regarded financial sector. I thought perhaps I could make my way in life as a bit of a banker. So it was that I found myself working for one of those wannabe banks we all loved and trusted, the local building society. My job was to run the settlement side in the in-house treasury department. We had a team of... Only Rebecca will be understanding this.
She's very much into this.
We had a team of dealers whose main job, it seemed, was to be entertained most evenings by those big fancy merchant bank types from London who would fly up for a night out, get our boys sozzled, make them promise to give them first call on whatever bond or gilt that needed to be traded the next day, and then head back home again. Well, my role involved picking up the pieces at the end of the dealer's day. At least they finished shouting down their phones at around 2:30 most afternoons. I never could work out what all the fuss was about, or why we needed the department at all, to be honest. We were a building society that borrowed lots of fivers from lots of Mrs. Mickenses, added them all up, and then lent them out to the odd customer who could afford to pay our extortionate mortgage rates. Who says banking is complicated? Borrow from your customers at X% and lend it back out again at X plus 4%. Simple.
Is that how it works?
Well, it depends on which one you're talking about, but anyway.
Well, I'm not going to tell you which one I'm talking about.
Let's not go into that.
We nearly got it out of him there.
But even then, the high and the mighty were conspiring to make the simple world of banking a dark and mysterious art, one which a mere 20-something-year-old accountant could not possibly be expected to comprehend. I kept my head down and I did my master's bidding. This involved 2 things. Firstly, the Building Societies Act allowed us to borrow a limited amount of funds from the market rather than having to trouble too many Mrs. Mickenses for their savings. Secondly, we usually had surplus funds at the end of each day, which I had to find a friendly bank to park it in. I lost many an argument as to why we couldn't just lend ourselves the surplus funds and avoid all the faff in between. Anyway, I soon learnt to shut up and get on with the job. Each day I would work out how much of our surplus funds I was going to ship out to a bank on overnight deposit. To do this, I had to sit at a dedicated terminal. We'd call it a PC these days, but I don't think the term actually existed back then. It was a giant box with a tiny monochrome green screen and a dot matrix printer hooked up to it.
A VDU we used to call those, didn't we?
Did we, in those days?
A VDU.
It did nothing else but send messages to our bank to transfer money to other banks.
Okay.
On the day in question, I needed to get rid of £2.2 million.
Oh,
What?
my.
It's just a line like that I just like, okay, I think we need to do this story.
I'm out of my depth here. All I've got is this. Look,
I had to get rid of 2.2 million, so I sat down at the terminal and typed 22, followed by a string of zeros. My assistant took over and did her bit, repeating the exercise for security purposes, then followed the usual ritual of hunt the director. Have you tried the pub? Someone said, because they had to sign off on it, followed by the glum chief accountant coming into the office muttering something or other about, oh, I don't know, do I have to release the payment? That kind of thing. Anyway, all the official channels were correctly found.
Okay.
It was just another normal day. That was until half an hour later when I took a call from our bank. The lady was a little agitated, to say the least. She said our account was overdrawn by £19.8 million.
Oh, fine.
She was so used to everything balancing out at the end of the day that she hadn't queried the transfer at the time. But when no money came back to replace it, she began to panic. At this stage, none of my colleagues were aware of what was going on. I had that horrible sinking feeling in my stomach. It was my job to ensure everything balanced, but it didn't, so it must be my fault. But what had gone wrong? Surely I was about to lose my job. It didn't take long to figure that 22 million had left our account instead of the planned 2.2 million.
Right.
That's 22 million rather than 2.2 million. I pulled the transfer paperwork from the file to find that both myself and my assistant had both, by accident, typed an extra zero into the PC.
What are the chances of that?
In our defence, 22... Now, here's
That's
the key,
good.
Here's the key bit, right?
Here we go.
In our defence, says Clive Harper,
Yeah.
22 with 6 zeros looks very similar to 22 with 5 zeros.
Yeah.
Great defence.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's
This
fine.
is why we're in the state we're in.
Absolutely
Here's the
understood,
thing.
yeah.
Also, note, the PC didn't print commas.
What?
An interesting fact. So therefore it's going to be slightly more confusing. And he's also, helpfully, for you collected, printed out 22 with 6 and then 22.
Yes, no,
with
he's-
five.
yeah.
It looks very, very, very similar.
Yeah.
Was my assistant going to be sacked as well? Not only had we both made an identical error by complete coincidence, the combined might of senior management had failed to spot it.
Yeah.
Surely if we were going to be sacked, they should fall on their swords as well. So anyway, this was a catastrophic time. I need to seek forgiveness for the distress caused to the poor lady at our bank who by this stage was having kittens. She was convinced she was going to lose her job and be sued for the shortfall, which, let me tell you, is £19.8 million, which she wouldn't have had. As it happened, I managed to blag the receiving bank to transfer the missing £19.8 million back without any authorisation at all, on the basis that they were only expecting £2.2 million in the first place. But my main purpose for writing to your show is to seek forgiveness on behalf of all your listeners. As future events have shown, this bank and many others besides have cost the world's taxpayers trillions of pounds in bailouts. No wonder they couldn't see the looming financial crisis coming when not one of them spotted our error, which could after all have been a deliberate attempt to defraud them, and that is where my sin lies. So in a nutshell, I throw myself at the mercy and seek forgiveness for not saving the world 16 years before the government had to. Yours sincerely, Clive Harper. First to the microphone and very keen to pronounce on this.
Yes, an expert.
Representing the Treasury Department of the BBC.
That is a great illustration of the things that go wrong day to day in banks, and the fact that the checks and balances that they put in place clearly didn't work. I mean, the whole point...
No one spotted the fact that there were 6 zeros, not 5.
The whole point of the assistant potentially, the whole point of the assistant was to check that he'd put in the right number, and she didn't manage to. And the whole point of the director was to check as well.
Yes.
So obviously there's too much room for human error, and they need to get their house in order. I think he got the money back. It was only being put on deposit, wasn't it, overnight? So there was never any real danger that they were going to lose the money. So I think I don't blame him. I blame the system, and I think it was a very interesting.
Fight the
confession.
machine.
Exactly. So you're forgiven.
Yeah, exactly. It's just what I've written here. Look. The system shouldn't have let you do it. That's the thing. Because your colleague checked it, your director checked it, the chief accountant is supposed to have checked it.
Deadly. What? He typed in the wrong number.
Yeah, but that's these things happen.
No, they don't. He typed in the wrong number.
And what was the comma bit?
Well, the comma bit would have clearly showed that it was 22
there we
million.
are, you see. Didn't print the commas, did it? You see, it's not his fault. Can't blame him for
No,
that.
it is his fault.
I forgive him for that. So there.
Pathetic. Yes.
What do you mean?
Okay.
I have to say,
here we go.
this story confirms every prejudice I've got about bankers
They're not
and,
fit- they're
and
not
the
fit to
banking
study
system.
students, you know.
Number one, how are you doing this job with no commas? Well, nobody's at any point said, do you know what would be a really good idea, because it does look similar when you've got 5 zeros and 6 zeros? Why don't we have a comma? No, let's not bother. Let's go out and get sozzled with a bunch of investment brokers instead, because that apparently is what we do. I also feel that there's so much snake oil salesmanship going on here, with you just come out with a load of big numbers and big terms, everyone's eyes glaze over, and that's where we are. So I am not going to forgive.
But he put it right.
Yeah, you did put it right in the end, so yes, I am going to forgive.
Oh, right.
What?
There you go.
You're such a
Yes,
pushover.
I am, yes.
Dear Father Simon and the Reflective Collective, which I like very much. Thank you, Megan. I've carried the shame of the following incident with me for about 44 years, and each time I think of it, this story I'm about to relate, I get a queasy feeling in my stomach, and I'm taken back to the anxiety that I felt as an inquisitive 4-year-old girl. I've toyed with unburdening this guilt for a number of years, listening to the many confessions on your show. But on hearing the recent new sofa confession, I feel that the time has now come for me to share with you the dreadful secret that I have been carrying. I was, as I said, 4 years old. My parents, 3 sisters and I had recently returned from living in Italy. It's the winter of 1969-1970. My father found our newly repatriated family a big old farmhouse in Devon to rent. And as we come back from Italy with nothing, my parents were grateful for all the old furniture which filled the property and which we made good use of, including an old sofa which was covered in a very old tapestry-type material. It's probably stuffed with horsehair, this sofa, raised on legs, as all old sofas and chairs seem to be. This is the end of the 60s, as I said, and my parents, having lived a few years in Italy, were always making the family evening meal a really elaborate affair, and the whole family would sit down to a big old pine dining table, which was situated in the main living area of the farmhouse, just a few feet behind the sofa, which was placed in front of the fireplace in the middle of the room. Dinner always went on for ever and ever. We had to talk to each other about our day and how it had gone, and never-ending food came out of serving bowls, and there were always lit candles on the table. Remember, these were the days of bohemian living, and health and safety considerations were not high on anyone's priority. Do you like that, Nigel? Instinctively,
Yeah.
You got a big old table, you got the fire, food coming in, never-ending
Sounds absolutely
torrents.
idyllic, and pine dining. I haven't heard that for
How
a while.
about that?
Yeah.
On the fateful evening in question, we had finished our evening meal, and my 3 sisters, Mum and Dad, had settled on the sofa and chair in front of the fire to watch a bit of something on the old black and white push-button television. The table was cleared, but the candles were still lit, adding to a certain ambience to the big old room on this cold, dark evening. And I started doing, as I was wont to do, a little whirly 4-year-old type dance, because I liked doing this thing. I started spinning. Revolving, with my arms stretched out just a little, and then I would spin some more. I was spinning so fast I didn't realise how close I was to the candles.
Oh, no.
And then my hand, just one hand, merely grazed one of the candles, but it was enough to pop it off the table, and in slow motion it rolled to the floor and stopped by the sofa, which was, as I mentioned, covered in a Hessian sack-type material, which caught fire immediately. I felt instantly sick, leapt up, put the candle back on the table unnoticed, or so I thought. In the same instant, my mother saw the flames licking out from the front of the sofa. She shrieked, "Fire!" and yanked everyone to safety. She and Dad leapt into action and flipped over the sofa, but all they saw was a bright orange glow go across the bottom of the sofa and then fade away. Luckily, just the top dry, dusty layer of the Hessian had burnt off, and the flame had gone no further. My parents carried the sofa outside, just in case it decided to repeat its spontaneous combustion, but it was okay. A couple of buckets of cold water were applied to ensure it didn't happen again. In the confusion, I had been shoved out of the way into the kitchen with my older sister. She tried to tell Mum what she'd seen, i.e. me, with my whirly dancing routine just before the fire, but was told by my mother to be quiet, or similar words, as Mum was in full rescue mode and in no mood to listen to a small child whittering on, for which I was very grateful. The old sofa was reinstated in the living room the following day, and we had many happy years bouncing, sitting and doing roly-polies on it. However, the story and my guilt never went away. My parents did some research on the old farmhouse and found out, unbelievably, that there had been an earlier house on the same site which had burnt down. Yes. Ooh. This led them to believe that the fire was in fact the work of a ghost.
Oh, right. OK.
A fiery spook.
Yeah.
That it hadn't been real flames that they'd seen, which is why it appeared and then disappeared again, leaving no trace. This story was told in great detail to friends and relatives, and at every dinner party ever hosted by my parents for many years after the event. It's the famous story of the haunted fire, the fire that wasn't caused by anything at all other than a spook. I have tried and failed on a number of occasions to tell all, but I haven't mustered the bravery. Recently I did a speech for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary and asked my sisters for any family stories that they could think of. My sister said, "Oh yes, do the haunted fire one." And again I felt shame and guilt and kept the story out of the speech. So I need to ask for forgiveness, not just from my family for inadvertently setting fire to what they were sitting on, leading them to be yanked off a comfy sofa by an alarmed parent, or from my sister for feeling pleased when her attempt to explain in a rational way what she thought could have happened was quashed dismissively, but also from all of the friends and the relatives and anyone else who's come into contact with my parents and had to hear all about the haunted fire and the haunted house in great detail. Can I just add for Matt that my parents were not thick for leaving candles out with small children around. It was just a different time with different attitudes.
Yeah, I think we'll be the judge of that.
Matt now crossing out his entire speech.
Underlining thick.
Okay. So this is interesting. So this is a casual accident that's happened. By the way, very dangerous, obviously, to play with candles. Never, ever do that. It's a very, very dangerous thing. But what's interesting is that it was one of those incidents, it happened, and they worked out that it was a ghost that was to blame. Now, I suspect many of them might prefer to think it was a ghost because this is a far more prosaic answer. But anyway, let's see what
Well,
Rebecca
I think Megan
makes.
is clearly quite traumatised by this incident because she can
Absolutely
remember
right.
it as if it happened yesterday and she was 4 years old. I think she was just doing what 4-year-olds do. She was dancing and spinning, how lovely, enjoying life. And it was the parents' fault for leaving the candles next to a Hessian hair sofa and horsehair sofa and Megan and her spinning. I love the way they'd prefer to believe that it was a ghost fire
Rather than their child.
when they'd left the candles near the sofa. So I think for that reason I don't forgive the parents, but I do forgive you, Megan.
With all the mariachi music, I feel like spinning sometimes as well. What about you, Nigel? Do you feel like a spin?
Oh, I think out of control, spinning top, tries to torch house in copycat even, burning down incidents. I don't know, I suppose just one of those things.
Was that even a sentence?
I don't even understand a word you're talking about.
That's the headlines. I can just see it now. Hold the front page. This is a goodie. Compared to grommets, I have to say I'm still getting over that. That's very remarkable.
That was fun.
Yeah, the boy who gets out of maths has grommets fitted. This pales into insignificance. But well, yes, I'm sure the parents did enjoy telling the story, and that's what the point. So well done for keeping it for many years. If there was any trauma involved, which I don't think there was that much, then well done for keeping it to yourself and allowing your parents to tell the ghost wielding candle story.
If you're wondering what on earth Nigel is talking about, by the way, the reference to the Gromit confession was on Tuesday, so you'll need the Confessions podcast for that, because it was a corker. What do you think, Brother Matt?
You've got to feel for the sister in this story, really, haven't you? Who's saying, no, it's not a ghost, it was my sister who knocked the candle over next to the horsehair sofa. That's why it's on fire. And these parents, they're going, oh no, we found that there was a fire here some years ago, so that means there's a ghost fire. You've also got to feel for the dinner party guests who, every time when they're leaving that house, obviously going, I can't believe they've cracked open the phantom fire story yet again. What on earth is going on with those parents? They are thick. That's what the dinner party guests are thinking, not my words. So I am going to forgive just because of those parents.
Four confessions for you, as ever. Let us know your tale. Heaven knows you've got enough. confessions@bbc.co.uk. More domestic dramas for you next week. Don't forget the Weekly Mayo, available now and every Thursday.